Hello and welcome to Perspectives with Neilo. I'm your host, Neilo Sullivan. If you are new to the show, we've got a treasure trove of insightful conversations waiting for you, and you can explore all of them on our blog at pwneilo.com or by searching for Perspectives with Neilo wherever you get your podcasts. With the promise of a new year comes the anticipation of new horizons, and for many, this is the time to plan travel for the year ahead. In 2024, the Chinese government unilaterally extended visa-free entry to citizens of 38 countries and has broadened a policy of offering visa-free entry for transit travellers who plan visits of 10 days or less. That currently applies to 54 nations. In a number of our past episodes, we've talked with experts about how China differs from Western democracies. And in this episode, we take a closer look at what you should know if you are thinking about travelling to the People's Republic of China. The People's Republic of China, or PRC, is an East Asian country with a population of over 1.4 billion people. It spans the equivalent of 5 time zones, although has only one official time zone, known as Beijing time, and it borders 14 nations from Russia and North Korea in the east to Nepal, India and Kazakhstan in the west. The capital city is Beijing, but Shanghai is the most populous city and the largest financial centre. The official language of China is Mandarin Chinese. However, there are also several other major dialects spoken in different regions. English is not widely spoken in China, with the exception of Hong Kong and possibly Shanghai, where fluency is more likely among those working in business and finance. While the PRC officially calls itself a democracy, using terms such as socialist consultative democracy and whole process people's democracy, the country is commonly described as an authoritarian one-party state. The party in question is the Chinese Communist Party, who came to power in 1949, and their system of government has been described in a previous episode of this podcast as a single-party Marxist-Leninist system, and you can check out our interview with Dr. Neilo Duggan of University College Cork, entitled China 101, if you'd like to find out more. The Chinese Communist Party implements very heavy restrictions across many areas of society, most notably against freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, free formation of social organizations, freedom of religion, and free access to the internet. In fact, China has consistently been ranked amongst the lowest as an authoritarian regime by many worldwide freedom and democracy indices. For example, the PRC scored an overall of 9 out of 100 in the 2024 Freedom House Global Freedom Index. This score is comprised of -2 out of 40 for political rights and 11 out of 60 for civil liberties. This ranks China with Iran, Yemen and Libya when it comes to personal freedoms, and far below most European countries who score in the high 90s. When it comes to press freedom, media in China is strictly controlled and censored by the Chinese Communist Party, with the main agency that oversees the nation's media being the Central Propaganda Department of the CCP. The largest media organizations, including the China Media Group, the People's Daily and the Xinhua News Agency, are all controlled by the CCP. For this reason, transparency into current affairs, weather events or even air quality can be difficult, with information being strongly filtered. Mass surveillance is also quite common in China, and the government monitors its citizens and visitors through internet surveillance, camera surveillance, and other digital technologies. Surveillance has become increasingly widespread and grown in sophistication under the current leader, Xi Jinping. Some sources estimate that there are over 700 million surveillance cameras in China. That's 1 for every 2 people. So now that we have some background, let's take a look at some of the other important considerations if planning a visit to China. Well, a good place to start is your government's travel advisory website. In Ireland, this information falls under the remit of the Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, and can be found at ireland.ie under the Passports and Travel section. Then scroll down and click on China as the destination. When we visited this website recently in January 2025, the first thing we noticed is that the Irish government advises travellers to apply a high degree of caution when travelling to China. A little further down the page is a section on one of the most important topics, and this comes under the heading of exit bans in China. So what exactly is an exit ban? To quote Ireland's DFA website, Chinese authorities may place an exit ban on an individual to prevent them from leaving the country. An exit ban may be placed on an individual in connection with an investigation into that individual, their family, or an employer, or in a criminal or civil matter, including a business dispute. Such bans, which are distinct from detention or imprisonment, are part of the Chinese legal process and may endure for months or longer. They are linked to the resolution of the legal process in question, and it is not always evident that you are the subject of an exit ban until you try to leave the country. If you are prevented from leaving the country because of an exit ban, seek legal advice immediately. Please also contact the Irish Embassy or Consulate General for consular assistance. End quote. One of the reasons I suspect that the topic of exit bans features so prominently on the DFA website is that Irish citizens have been the target of these exit bans in the past. One such case which gained widespread media attention was that of Richard O'Halloran. Mr. O'Halloran was the target of an exit ban and was trapped in China between 2019 and 2022. The reason was related to a civil dispute involving his company, China International Aviation Leasing Service. The company had become embroiled in an investigation by the Chinese authorities into a peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding scheme organised by the company's chairman, Min Jae-dong, that predated O'Halloran's employment with the company. O'Halloran travelled to China in February 2019 to meet investors and assess the problems facing the business. After a week of meetings in Shanghai, when he attempted to board his flight on his return trip to Dublin, he was detained at passport control at the airport and issued with an exit ban. While Richard O'Halloran was never accused of any wrongdoing, nor was he ever charged with any crime, it took almost 3 years of delicate negotiations involving his company, the Irish government and the Chinese authorities to secure his release in January 2022. The process took a heavy toll on Richard O'Halloran and his family. It also left its mark on Ireland-China relations and has heightened the awareness and the risks of travelling to China. As we indicated earlier, exit bans are not just applied because of business disputes. An exit ban can be applied anytime the CCP decides to do so, and for whatever reason they choose. So, how widespread is the use of exit bans in China? The international human rights NGO Safeguard Defenders published a report in 2023 on the increasing use of exit bans by the Chinese government. Their report says that since Xi Jinping took power in 2012, China has expanded the legal landscape for exit bans and increasingly uses them, sometimes outside legal justification, on everyone from activists to foreign journalists and for transnational repression and other coercive practices. According to the report, between 2018 and 2022, 4 new laws authorizing exit bans were passed in China, making 14 laws in total. One of them, the supervision law, allows exit bans to be placed on anyone under investigation and anyone connected to an investigation, even if they are not a suspect. The Safeguard Defenders report says that there is no official data available on the total number of exit bans in China. However, they estimate, based on data from the Supreme People's Court, that the number has increased from about 5,000 in 2016 to almost 39,000 in 2020. While only administrative, criminal and civil case-related exit bans appear in this database, it is expected that these figures are an underestimation of the real number of exit bans, especially when ethnicity-based exit bans are taken into account. Many countries' government travel websites carry advisories on China's exit bans, so be sure to check your own government's website for specifics. And also keep in mind that just because your country may be on the visa-free entry list, this in no way indicates that exit ban risks are diminished. It's also worth noting here that China introduced new regulations on July 1st of 2024 that allow security officers to access devices such as phones and laptops without warrants, all in the name of national security. As a result, foreign travellers to China and anyone transiting are already at a high risk of snap inspections of electronic devices and data compromise. Analysis on the website Dragonfly Intelligence says that inspections focus on collecting personal and commercial data, and frequent inspections of electronic devices, including those of international travellers, may take place at border checkpoints. This could mean, for example, that if a traveller has criticised China or the CCP on social media, or if their device contains photos, symbols or documents that could be interpreted as a security threat to the CCP, they could be questioned or detained. Our advice would be only to carry a burner phone or laptop if intending to visit China. And while this offers no guarantee of anything, it should at least help reduce the risk of exposure or data compromise. Intending visitors should also note that China has its own mobile payment system that discourages cash. Even small street vendors tend to use native mobile apps like WeChat and Alipay. Many people are critical of the immense amount of user data these platforms collect, all of which is available to the Chinese government. This is probably a good time to also mention that most Western applications like Facebook, Instagram, Google, WhatsApp and so on are banned inside China. Access to these applications is blocked via the Great Firewall. If you wish to have access to your Western social media applications, including your email while travelling in China, then you will need to use a VPN, a virtual private network, which you should install on your device before you depart. As we mentioned earlier, while the Irish government travel website does rate security status at a high degree of caution for China, it doesn't give a lot of additional detail. Other countries' websites, including the United States, do raise a security alert in relation to recent attacks in public areas. The US government website advises increased caution in public venues and explains that over the past several months there have been multiple reports of unprovoked attacks in public areas. Some incidents occurred in areas frequented by foreigners, including public parks or shopping areas, while others occurred near schools. The attacks include stabbings and driving vehicles into crowds. Unfortunately, many of these events are not reported in Western media, as news of their occurrence is often suppressed or prohibited by the Chinese Communist Party. And while the CCP may suppress certain information, the Chinese government allocates substantial resources to propaganda efforts, both domestically and internationally. Propaganda operations are extensive, reaching deep into society through various channels, including state-controlled media, education systems, and social media platforms. The CCP's propaganda apparatus is a significant force that extends beyond China's borders, with substantial investments in international media outlets and influence operations. There are many social media influencers, particularly Western influencers, that are recruited and paid to promote travel to China on Western social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, and so on. The one characteristic all these influencers have is that they are rarely, if ever, critical of China or the Chinese Communist Party, and only present a positive narrative rather than a more balanced view. They are generally critical of the West and tend to focus on the same common themes and locations. You'll see multiple YouTube videos from Western vloggers, for example, covering the so-called beauty of Chongqing or the peace and freedom of Urumqi in Xinjiang, not to mention the speed and efficiency of China's high-speed rail network, as well as the safety of Chinese society. Many of these YouTubers have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and their videos are fiercely promoted and commented on by Chinese nationalists, although, as we already mentioned, YouTube is officially blocked in China. The CCP is also using social media influencers to whitewash human rights abuses, as in the case of Uyghur genocide in Xinjiang, and think tanks such as the Australian Strategic Policy Institute and others have compiled detailed reports on this. We've linked them in our blog if you'd like to read further. One thing is for sure, the scale and scope of these disinformation operations pose a significant challenge to open societies and democratic values. So, if you'll pardon the pun, given all the red flags, how successful has China's unprecedented lifting of visa requirements been in attracting more visitors to the PRC? A recent article by Bloomberg entitled "China's Biggest Ever Bid for Foreign Tourists is Falling Flat" discusses how China's visa-free entry is only attracting a fraction of the hoped-for tourists. According to the article, foreign visitor entries to China totaled just under 23 million in the first 3 quarters of 2024, reaching only 63% of 2019's same period level and well short of the near full recovery Beijing would have been hoping for. To further compound the issue, the tourists China is attracting with its visa-free policies aren't the big spending ones. While visitor numbers from Malaysia, Vietnam and Russia are up, tourists from European countries and North America are down significantly. For Beijing, the ramifications will limit its ability to prop up a sluggish economy and facilitate investment. It's also a failed opportunity to project a better image abroad, facing into an uncertain term as President-elect Donald Trump returns to the White House. We've added a link to the Bloomberg article in the Dive Deeper section of our blog. Finally, we want to touch on the area of flights. Major global airlines are reducing services and in some instances withdrawing from China altogether, as longer routes to Asia following the closure of Russian airspace have raised operational costs while demand has been low. For example, Virgin Atlantic has ended its London-Shanghai flights, and British Airways has paused its London-Beijing flights until at least November 2025. BA has also reduced its Heathrow-Hong Kong services by 50%. Lufthansa has removed its daily non-stop Frankfurt-Beijing flight, and SAS Scandinavian suspended its Copenhagen-Shanghai flights on November 8th. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the EU and the UK, along with other Western nations, imposed a blanket flight ban on Russian aircraft. Russia responded in kind by closing its airspace, forcing many European carriers to fly longer routes to reach Asia. Longer flights require more fuel, which makes flights more expensive. Chinese airlines, however, are not subject to Russian airspace prohibitions, so they can fly the same routes into Europe faster and cheaper than their European counterparts. However, China's economic problems have put a damper on outbound travel, while lackluster international interest in visiting China is dampening inbound arrivals. The silver lining in all of this is that while major carriers have pulled back from China, some are adding capacity to other parts of Asia, so there are still a lot of exciting places to visit outside of China. And if you are travelling or transiting in Asia, it's worth bearing in mind that although Hong Kong is a popular international transit hub, it is now controlled by China and governed by China's national security law. So therefore, it falls prey to all the risks we have previously mentioned. There are many other aspects related to travel in China, and as we mentioned at the outset, your government's travel website is a good place to start. After that, we'd recommend established travel websites, apps and guidebooks. We've also placed references and links to all the topics we discussed in this episode in the Dive Deeper section of our blog, which you can find at pwneilo.com. We hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode, and we'd really appreciate a like, share or follow on your podcast app, as well as our social media pages, and thanks in advance for your support. But that's where we leave it for now. Thank you for listening, and until the next time, slán le spanacht.